Okay. Good evening again. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole for the Village of Cary for May 16th, 2023 to order with roll call, please.
Dudek?
Here.
Weinhammer? Here. Collier?
Here.
Walrath?
Here.
McAlpine?
Here.
Stefani?
Here.
Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Public comments, where the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise in the agenda. We have nobody signed in. Is there anybody here who would like to address the Committee of the Whole? We'll go ahead and close public comments at 6:59. One thing on the agenda tonight is a discussion regarding the Outdoor Water Restriction Ordinance Amendment. Turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Mayor. If you recall, in November and December of last year, we had a couple presentations to the Committee of the Whole regarding an outdoor water use and conservation ordinance amendment. This presentation here tonight is in response to feedback from those meetings from the Village Board. Briefly, again, why were you doing this? It's an effort to conserve water, protect the aquifers here in McHenry County, which are rather sensitive resources, and promote the sustainability of the village in the future. Our ambition here with how we structured the proposed amendment is to make it as simple as possible for residents to understand and for our staff here to enforce. So you'll see that we did use a color-coded strategy, which is common with many other municipalities in the area. And next. So what we have proposed here, based on recommendations from the Committee of the Whole previously, is a new implementation of an even-odd watering schedule, that being during normal green conditions, an address with an even number at the end, an even address such as 454 Carywood Circle, would be permitted to water on even numbered days, such as the 6th, 10th, 12th, etc. Similarly, a address with an odd number would be permitted to water on an odd number day, 15th, 17th, 19th, etc. That is different than our current code, which currently has no restrictions during the green condition. Next, we have the yellow tier, which is a conservation tier during semi-drought conditions. Here we would propose maintaining that even-odd status, but implementing a 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. Time limit on watering. That's different than our current code, which currently, during yellow condition, implements a 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. only status. During the red or an emergency tier, our current code will be maintained, which prohibits all outdoor water uses. Here is shown some language that is in this proposed ordinance regarding new or replacement lawns and seeding and sod and athletic or recreational fields. You can see that for new lawns or new sod, we are proposing a permit, which would be good for 10 days. During the first day of that permit, the permittee would be authorized to water for up to 8 hours. The following 9 days, they would be limited to the 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. Restriction window. That is the same for both the green and the yellow conditions. During the red condition, again, all outdoor water uses would be prohibited. For athletic and recreational fields, we are proposing no restrictions during the green status. During the yellow, 6 p.m. to 9 a.m. Similarly, only in that window, and during the red or an emergency tier, we would propose all outdoor water uses being prohibited. That is all we have. Again, that was based on the recommendations we've received previously, trying to incorporate some language additionally for these new construction projects that incorporated sod, as well as our recreational sites here in town. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those.
I got a question.
Sure.
Who dictates when it's green, yellow, or red?
That would be under the authority of the village administrator or the director of public works.
And how will we get the message out besides social media? Will we have signs anywhere, like neighborhoods? Or yes.
Yeah, we could post on entrances to town, similar to other municipalities you've seen, whether we're in the green, yellow, or red condition.
And we do currently have those signs.
Yeah.
Right. They could be by our new Cary signs.
I never noticed them.
We are proposing to do some updated signage for this season that are larger,
Yeah.
which will help with that.
Thank you.
How many residents in Cary have a private well, and how will these restrictions be, both business and residents? And how will these affect anybody who does happen to have a private well in the village?
The restrictions would be to the village's water supply system. Deputy Director Stein might know off the top of his head how many private wells we have in town, but wouldn't imagine it's a very large number.
I don't think there's,
Exact
No.
number, no.
it's not many.
No, I want to say it's under 20, 10, I believe.
And are we then asking for compliance for those folks, or is it irrelevant? So we're only worried about folks that are drawing from our reserve?
Correct. This would be for the village's water supply system.
Any other thoughts on this?
You know, I like what we put together, and I like the summary here, so thank you. When I read it, I started to think, because water is talked about all the time, is there any merit to just having two tiers, you know, the constant one being the conservation tier, and then the other one, the red tier, and maybe modifying the conservation hours a little bit, but only having two. I really like the idea of Cary saying we have a conservation tier for water. I think that's very green and probably very topical. So that was the only comment I had about it. If we stay with three, I don't have a problem with it. It's just a thought I had.
And to that point, some communities have a similar setup that by code that Public Works is proposing. Many communities also default themselves by virtue of their city managers or public works directors, they set themselves at yellow all the time, even if they have a green opportunity. That could be a policy decision that's available, still under the umbrella of even this code as written.
I think if we stay with this, I would like to see our green code called conservation, because it is odd even, so it's not like a carte blanche like we used to have. So we are still conserving the village's water supply. I just think it's got a nice tone to it, that's all.
And I think that was the idea when we said it, when we talked about this for the last year when we went through it. It was, we wanted to be proactive about being conserving, that we know the aquifers are low, that we know what's going on with it, and getting something like this in our current, updating our current code to reflect that is positive. I'm fine with the green, yellow, red. I think it's pretty simple to just flip it. I just like that we're even odd no matter what, that we're not just open, that we've said, hey, we are addressing this before anyone requires us to address it, because at some point, there will be a dictate coming down from the state, in my opinion, saying you have to do stuff like this anyway. So why not be ahead of the curve?
So just to clarify, we have no current restrictions, correct? If we don't place any restrictive use on it right now, somebody could water 10 hours a day if they want to?
In the green condition.
In the
that's
green
correct.
condition? Okay. So in the green condition. So we're proposing an even odd day on an everyday basis.
Correct.
What's our communication strategy? Do we have an idea in place of how we're going to then let people know, number one, to Trustee Dudek's point, this is a conservation issue, it's not really a restriction issue. And number two, speaking on a more agronomic level, it's actually better for your grass if you don't water it every single day. It'll provide, a better plant. So what's our education strategy? When we announce green as our standard and it's even odd, there will be some questions back on why can't I water? I'm at 404, why can't I water on the 5th of the month? What's our education strategy to those residents?
Similar to when we've enacted our yellow tier in the last couple of years, we've had some drought conditions. There have been press releases, our various digital outreach methods, Cary News Weekly, social media, the website, the signage. But the big key, I think the most effective one has been the press release. And obviously with the new ordinance, there'd be some educational outreach just by default because the parameters are different now.
Do we have a fine system in place if people don't follow this?
Yes.
Is it more of a written warning at first and then if they
Compliance?
Yes,
Compliance.
with all our codes, the village's aim is for compliance,
Right.
not necessarily fines right off the bat, and it would default to the fine section of our village code as a whole. So there's a provision that sets a fine per violation per day if it were to get to that point.
And I would stress that I think the piece out to the residents not only is this a conservation issue, but if we're stressing with them, this is actually better for the things that you're trying to take care of. It's better for your grass, it's better for your, all these things. If that education piece is in there, I think that's going to be helpful, rather than just we're taking away one day out of 2 in your watering capability. Is this is actually going to be a conservation piece, and it's going to be better for the product that you're trying to keep alive.
Yeah, we can include that in our outreach.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments regarding this? Tim, could you, or Courtney, could you go back to the slide with the permit is being issued for sod? I think that's going to be just a nightmare. I honestly think that's just going to be no offense, Tim, or whoever put it on there. I just think that we have to rely by educating the residents that if they have a new lawn, they have these are your capabilities, and trust them to do that. By us getting it, it's just more administrative work. It's who's going to monitor, who's going to go out there and see, that kind of a thing. I think we have to trust our residents that they're going to comply. This is how it's going to be. I think from what I'm hearing too is that the messaging has to be that we're conserving water, but these are actually better for what you're trying to do, and this is the reasons why. So I would like to see the permit required ICSNAID.
I would add that it is pretty consistent with what most communities do, and we're not talking about the situations to where someone is addressing a patch in their lawn or a small section. This is complete replacement lawns over a broad area. This is sod in a very large scale, typically tied to a new construction or full renovation that typically has a building permit associated with it. And I think I'd ask maybe Director Simmons to comment on the logistics of how that would be implemented, because obviously this, the way the code is drafted, that is through the Community Development Department that we would facilitate these situations.
Yeah, so certainly from a permit standpoint, if there's a new construction project that is residential development or commercial development, they're going to have a large area that they're going to be producing it. See it happening right now on Cimarron Drive. We would, as part of the permit for that project, would issue the conditions, a statement of conditions for them. So when they do get to that point, they're aware of what the code is, so they will have a permit to construct the property. And then once the lawn is installed and seeded, that they will be aware of what these conditions would be. So in that case, it wouldn't be a separate permit necessarily, as opposed to the permit that would be constructed for that project. We would just
That's for new construction.
Correct.
So that's associated. So they're
Right.
not coming into the municipal center to obtain a new permit because they're replacing their lawn.
In that scenario, correct. That would be correct.
So
yeah.
that's what this is referring to, or
So there's the two scenarios would be, so with the code, we would recommend that if somebody is reseeding their lawn or replacing a lawn, existing property, and they're redoing it, that we would have a separate permit for that, an over-the-counter permit, simple to issue and implement, and just have that knowledge of them that this is the timing that would be required for that. And it wouldn't be a large cost for that. Inspections required is just more to track that a permit was obtained for it and that they're compliant with the code.
Can I ask a quick?
I was going to suggest, really the only way the only time I can find that permit scenario applicable is during conservation tier, during the yellow color. To your point, Mayor, I would agree that somebody just wants to replace their lawn and we're requiring them to go in during normal conditions and obtain a permit. I think that might be a little bit of an overreach. However, during conservation, I think very much they could then apply for, I guess, what amounts to a variance, so that during conservation they would allow to be watering during these 10 days, et cetera, to protect their investment, but only during that conservation tier. I would see that as kind of a hybrid or conservation or a compromise between these two.
I think this, listening to the way it was described, to me, it seems like it's more commercial oriented. I'm not sure it should apply to a resident wanting to replace their lawn conservation color or not. I think, again, we don't have 10 different new subdivisions happening, but that to me is where the application of this lies, more so than, somebody wants to replace their front lawn. I do think that would be a kind of a compliance nightmare to police.
I agree.
If we did, we could go that approach, but if we do, just note that when builders or contractors or residents resod an entire lawn or a part of a lawn, the best practices there would be to more or less water what we're recommending here. You're going to need to water a certain amount every day for a certain period for that sod to be established. If we didn't require a permit, didn't have a code parameter for green, because our new proposed green condition is only water every other day, you wouldn't be able to do what's recommended to establish that sod under our normal green code condition.
I get that, it's the permit piece
Mhm.
that I
That's-
can't
yeah.
get on, that's all.
Well, I look at it as if, yes, you're supposed to get a permit to do that, and I understand it can be a little bit of a hassle. But I look at this as that it's better to have something set up. If we find that it's not working and it's a nightmare, we can revisit it. But I think we set it up to say we're going conservation-wise. We want to address things like new lawns and lawn sod. To ignore it makes it sound like it's just not an issue. And it is an issue. So I think you put it in there and, yeah, you see what happens. And if it winds up being a nightmare, we revisit a little bit. But it may work out just fine as well.
I'm just curious, how out of a given year, how often are people actually turned in for this? I mean, are we talking like 100 households, 50 households?
Currently, they're not required to obtain a permit, so we're not tracking that information.
I'm just saying in general. So with our current green, yellow, red, so 6 p.m. to 9 a.m., so let's say we're under yellow tier right now. Are we seeing like a lot of people actually being turned in for this?
Turned in as far as
Like
violations?
Yes, violations.
It's not a significant issue. I guess, I mean, there are times where when we do get into those conservation areas, I mean, most of the time we have been green, and there's no restrictions at that point. So, when there have been instances where we've been in the yellow condition, we have noticed, through code enforcement that people have been watering lawns, on the wrong day or during the hours that they're not allowed to. But I can't give you a number to say that it's X amount of the community is non-compliant, but there are, with any code issue, there are individuals that may not be aware of it, and it's an educational piece to advise them of what the code is and generally get compliance once it does occur.
When we were in the yellow condition in the last couple of years, the observations from our staff, especially with some of the new construction going on, was when we were in the yellow and advised that they could only water certain times a day. That was where a lot of that feedback came, and it would be reminded of how it is in other communities, and that the sod requirements to establish properly are XYZ. So it's not a major problem by any stretch of the imagination, but it is an issue that was pointed out to us while we were in the yellow condition last year by builders.
Who pointed that out? I'm sorry?
Builders.
Builders pointed out that they wanted a permit?
No, that they needed to water every day.
Got it.
Outside the
Okay.
parameters that our code allowed in our yellow condition last year.
Got it.
Any other thoughts on this?
So sounds like consensus is we would
Leave it to try it.
try the permit, or would we like to keep the parameters but with no permit? We could try either way.
I say go with what you did, what you guys set up.
All right, any other comments regarding this? Tim, thank you very much.
Thank you for making it so easy.
Thank you.
It's very nice, easy to be able to visually kind of go through it.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 7:17.